Hey, you guys, welcome back. It is not every day that I get to have someone on the podcast whose ministry and work has made as profound an impact on my family as today's guest. I every time he's on, I have to give a shout out to how much his writing, his teaching, his friendship has impacted our family. So I am very happy to welcome Chuck Black back to the podcast today. Chuck, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Leslie. It's always a joy and a pleasure to join you on the podcast, and also to join you guys out on the convention circuit. You've allowed us to be part of your ministry from really the very beginning, and we have just enjoyed that so much and made such wonderful friends along the way, including you and David, and always grateful to be with you.
It is a lot of fun, and looking back, all of the friendships that have made that are, we're from all over the place, and yet we have this. I kind of liken it to like a band of gypsies. We just kind of go around and do our thing, and it's so fun because it's like a family reunion every time we come back together after a long winter without seeing each other. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Chuck Black, you are in for a huge treat today. Just the message that God has given him, um, just the different perspective that he brings to the program is phenomenal. So, Chuck, for those who don't know you, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background because it's really unique how God has led you through the years.
Certainly. So I hail from North Dakota, born and raised here. And I went to school to get an electrical engineering degree. There's two things I always wanted to be as a child, and that was an engineer and a fighter pilot. And so I started off with an engineering degree, and the Lord just kind of led me on a journey, kind of a circuitous route to those destinations, which He actually allowed me to live. I entered the Air Force at first as a combat communications officer, engineer, and then applied for pilot training, got accepted, and the Lord blessed me. I did really well there, and I got to fly F-16s for a number of years. After 9 years in the service, I exited, and about then is when Andrew and I started homeschooling our kids. We have six children, and it was the funny thing is when Andrew and I were dating, we both decided we weren't going to have any kids because we were the yuppies, and we just didn't want to be
Ah,
interfered with,
nice.
Yeah.
Exactly. You
And
have your plan, you've got your path.
Yep, I'm so glad God didn't leave us in our selfish condition because that first little girl came along and we fell in love with being parents, and I
Yeah.
had no idea that heart was in me. And so after six children, I, I just became um, enamored with making sure I did my utmost to raise them to love the Lord. And you hear statistics about a lot of young people falling away, and it kind of frightened me as a dad. And so one of the things that came out of that passion to get them to really understand their faith was to write a couple of stories that ended up getting published, and then those turned into a six-book set, and then all of a sudden 15, and now I'm at about 23 books. So now I'm writing for my
Wow.
grandchildren.
That's
So
amazing.
that's kind of my journey.
It's it I'm so grateful. We were talking before we pressed record. I'm so grateful how God uses different backgrounds, different voices, different approaches, different understandings and viewpoints on things to address all the things that we need to hear. And you even see it in the New Testament. You see some
Mhm.
softer, gentler guys, and you see some guys that are much more straightforward. I was thinking as we were getting ready to talk, God has called you to address some pretty heavy issues. I look back, some of the stuff that you've talked about at Teach Them Diligently through the years is dealing with doubt, courageous fatherhood, fighting apathy, escapism, and media. I remember so many themes, especially for our family. We just diving into the Night series, and so many heavy themes that even now we look around in culture and we're like, oh, it's like Chuck Black was a prophet. We can see this playing out now. Um, why do you think that God has led you to be so focused on some of these things that we so desperately need to hear, but so many people
Mhm.
are? That's not the first place a lot of people go, I guess.
No, that's very true. My subjects do tend to be a little bit heavier in tone and nature, but I also feel like those really important, maybe hard topics are things that
Mm.
oftentimes get kind of swept under the rug and
Yeah.
aren't dealt with directly. And I'm just not that kind of a guy. I think a lot of it stems from my military experience. I saw such a parallel between being a warrior for this nation and then later on being a warrior for our family for the cause of Christ against spiritual darkness. And so I really I see things pretty dramatically in that light, and I see the enemy
Mm.
robbing the future of families and children of their faith through deception and entertainment and things that are just um, oftentimes as Christians we're playing catch up and we're behind the curve, and so
Yeah.
and unfortunately the consequences are way too great, and so as parents, I just really encourage them to engage, fully engage, see see the conflict for what it is, see that spiritual warfare for what it is, be trained in it, be aware of it, prepare for it, and then go do battle with it. And so I do tend to get a little bit heavy with my topics, but I also feel like that I learned in the military that training eliminates fear. And so if you're
Yeah.
afraid
Hmm.
something's going to happen, man, start training. And so I give training on the stuff that I feel really is critical to the success of the faith of our young people today. So that's just kind of
Yeah,
how I'm
and
wired.
that's yeah, absolutely. And I so appreciate that. And I wrote down training eliminates fear is such a powerful, short, easy to remember statement. But the older I get, as David and I, have seen so much because of the ministry that God has given us, it is by not addressing, by fearing and being paralyzed by fear on some of these topics that we see so much devastation, and not just in the outcome within our children, but also the devastation that the fear and anxiety wreaks on us as parents because we fail to deal with it. And so I so appreciate your call to really address and go into some of those things. And I highly recommend the resources that you have that go into them, as well as if you're a 365 member, check out those recordings because so phenomenal to help you address some of these harder issues.
Hmm. Well, thank you. Yes. It says in 2 Timothy 1:7 that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So, that's a theme that I see from Genesis to Revelation. God says, don't be
Mm.
afraid, don't be afraid. And then yet he also tells us about this, raging battle and the devil walking around as a lion. So, I mean, the only way to really reconcile those two messages is that, as Jesus says, be prepared, and
Yeah.
training is the key, and spiritual training. And so the only way you can train effectively is to train for those things that are could potentially most devastating if people aren't aware of it. So yeah, that's so you know my wife, oftentimes she'll be in the audience and she'll be like, tone it down a little, Chuck, but it's just not my nature. I just I just go for it. But the thing of it is too, I also don't forget to tell people that listen, um, the more you train, the less fearful you're going to be, the more power you can tap into through Christ. And just remember that it's not you in that battle; it's the Lord Jesus Christ, and He's just calling us to join Him. So the
Yeah.
victory is already won, and we just got to be part of it. So.
Yeah. Amen. And um, so often one of the things that is, I would say, frustrating, but really it's more sad, it's more grievous to David and I, is we look around and we see people who are willing to train for athletics, they're willing to do continuing education for a job or whatever, but to really invest in their most important call of all and the most impactful thing that they can do, parent and disciple their children well, they don't see that on the same level as requiring the training and the education and the constant equipping and growth. And yet
Mm.
there is nothing that is more important than what God has called us to do. Um, so
Absolutely, Leslie. That's a travesty, honestly. We spend so much extra energy and effort on temporal things that really aren't going to mean anything in eternity. But in reality, the training that we need to do first as parents, and then the training that we need to pass on to our kids, has eternal significance. And we just need to really get our
yeah,
priorities straight. and not get distracted by the world, you know. And boy, there's a lot of distractions today. You just like you said, you know, 10 years ago, the difference between 10 years ago and today, even 5 years ago and today, is just significant. So if you look ahead 5 years,
Right.
so what are we in for here? And you know, the statistic I think that frightened me the most, if I, you know, when I did get afraid, is when I heard Dr. Dobson. He gave a quote that a research team determined that 80% of young people raised in evangelical homes will leave their faith never to return. And I thought, man, that's
Wow.
five of my six children, God forbid. And so at that
Yeah.
moment, I decided I'm not going to hold anything back in this journey of training first myself and Andrea together, and then our children to prepare for this because I didn't want to lose a single one to the enemy. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, God has given us so much instruction and so much hope through his word that
mm,
we do not have
amen.
to fall prey to those statistics. You know, we
Amen.
talk a lot of time about, you know, one of the biggest ways to not be a part of that statistic is the time and the intentionality that you as parents spend with your kids. But all of those things take discipline, they take focus, they take approaching it very seriously and not flippantly. If you don't put your stakes in the ground and decide this is the path that we are going and we are not veering outside of this, you're going to find that you're floating all over the place. Your kids will know that. And then they don't really have that solid anchor for their own faith when it's time for them to launch and go out.
Boy, I couldn't have said it better. It's almost like, you know, we go to the same conferences and talk about these important things to the same people. No, that
Exactly.
yeah, absolutely, you nailed it. And the, it's hard to see parents and families that don't take it serious because you just ache for them to really get hold of it
Hmm.
because you know there's going to be regret. And so, um, my message throughout the country at all these conferences is just what you said, and opening their eyes to the spiritual warfare that's going on, to the consequences of not giving it your full attention, your full diligence. There's just too much at stake, and I didn't want to waste a minute of my life. You know, I can't say I've done that because you know we're human, we leak, but uh, I just wanted all of my energy to really be focused on having the kids um, understand that at least that we were doing our very utmost. And I now our kids are all grown and raised, they're all married, and we have lots of grandchildren, and we're on the other side of that, which is amazing. And one of the kids just here in the last few months said, you know, Dad, we look now at what you and Mom did, and you gave it your all, and that was such a blessing to hear coming from them. You know that they knew that we were taking it serious, and it wasn't for our sake, but for theirs. And by God's grace, they all love the Lord, and they're all you know, saved and living for Him. And but it does take an investment. It takes a lot of work, and but I promise you out there, families, moms, dads, it is so worth it. It is so worth it. You will never regret a minute that you have spent teaching your children about Jesus Christ. You will never regret it. I promise you.
Yeah, I 100% echo that. Want to move on really quick. Like you noted at the very beginning that you started your path that you and Andrea had set out didn't look anything like the path that God had for you. Um, so there had to be a moment or a number of moments, a sequence of moments that took you from fighter pilot, engineer, tactical guy, living the dream, doing exactly what you always wanted to do, to dad who is sitting there writing stories for his kids to make sure that he's investing in their faith. How did God change your path so dramatically?
Yes, that is a big question. But I think it comes down to specific moments in time that I call defining moments. They're they're
Mm,
they're special moments where Jesus Christ shows up and intersects your life. And I really feel that a lot, you know, I think that we probably all get about a dozen or so of these through our lives. And I think a lot of people um, miss them. I don't, either
yeah.
they don't recognize it or they don't want to respond. and I'm just very grateful. I'm sure there's probably been a few that I might have missed, but the ones that really changed the trajectory of my life were the ones where I saw that the Lord was present in that moment, and He was making a huge impact on me, and I had a decision to make, and to make that decision and follow Him just it just changes everything. It changes futures. It changes the destinies of families. It changes the destinies of children. And to be honest with you, some of those moments are kind of scary, because he's asking you to step outside your comfort zone
Yeah.
and take a leap of faith. And but man, it really I know I can think of about six or seven that just even all the way back to when I was in like fourth grade. There were moments that God said, "Okay, Chuck, you know, it's time to make a decision here. Who you really going to be?"
Yeah.
And thankfully, those shaped me to prepare for this ministry I now have. And I'm just humbled by this that it's not just books for my kids now; it's books for the nation and even other countries. And so,
My kids.
um,
Books for
your
my kids,
kids,
Chuck.
yeah, right, right, which has always been a fun thing to hear. um, but you know what? And I think probably the best way to encapsulate what I'm trying to say here is the story of blind Bartimaeus in Mark chapter 10. You know, here he was, a blind man sitting by the road, and Jesus walks by with a crowd, and he asks, who is it, Jesus? And he starts crying out, Jesus, Jesus, Son of David. And the people around him just say, hey, be quiet, you don't bother him. And it says that he even cries out all the louder. And then finally Jesus stops and says, bring him to me. And so Bartimaeus is brought to Jesus, and Jesus looks at him. He says, so what do you want me to do for you? There are so many lessons in this story. Here's this guy who's been blind from birth, and he asks him, what do you want me to do? You think, well, duh. But Jesus often asks us, what do you want me to do for you? And he's really looking. He knows what we need, but
Right.
sometimes what we need isn't always what we ask for or what we want. And so, it's a test. And so, Bartimaeus says, well, to have my sight restored. And so Jesus heals him. And then there's so many lessons here. First of all, Bartimaeus recognized that Jesus was walking by. I mean, how many times had he been on that road and just everyday people come walking by? But that day, that special day, he had a divine appointment with the Savior of the universe, right? And so, and so many times I think Jesus walks by us and we just miss it. And we need to be ready. We need to be eager. And the world's going to tell you, hey, be quiet. You don't know what you're doing, right? Just like Bartimaeus experienced. And so we need to have the courage to recognize that when Jesus is walking by and call out for him. And then the other thing I tell people is, when that happens, and Jesus turns and sets his eyes on you, what are you going to ask for? What are you going to ask him for? What are you going to have the courage to ask for what you really need spiritually? And I think my favorite part of the whole story, though, is at the very end. It says that Bartimaeus received his sight and he turns and follows Jesus. I mean, that's really the key. Jesus blesses him, restores him, heals him, and then you turn and follow him. So when God gives you that gift, he gives you that encounter, and you recognize it, and you call out for it, and he asks you, man, whatever it is, turn and follow Jesus. And so,
Yeah.
there are moments, I think, I'm sure you have those moments in your life too, Leslie, where you look back and you say, yep, that was God intersecting my life and put me on a different path, a different trajectory. So, I just really want young people to realize that. I want them to recognize that there will be times when Jesus is going to walk by you. Are you ready? Can you recognize it? Can you say yes? And can you follow? If you have that kind of courage, get ready. You got an adventure ahead for you.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of times I think those encounters, those opportunities, those defining moments, I think a lot of times they don't make sense to us. They are not what common sense would have you do next. I
Yes.
At least that's the way God has often led in our lives. The biggest steps that He has asked us to take on paper, it's like you people are nuts. What are you doing? And yet
Yep.
God is so faithful to to first of all give you a true sense of his presence and his leading in that, as you alluded to. We talk a lot about most of our decision making, as you know, after we had kids anyway, was as we came to a intersection point where we had to make a point of decision. It was, what will bring our kids to Jesus the best? What is going to give us the best opportunity to disciple and shepherd their hearts? What will bring them to Jesus the best? And so when you have some kind of a gauge like that, that is helping you weigh those decisions, even when they don't make the most I guess fiscal sense in some ways, that is going to really help you wade through a lot of the distractions and a lot of the noise to hear what Jesus is saying, often in a still small voice as he's leading you along the way.
Absolutely. You hit on so many important things there. And for me personally, I can just share one moment with you. Um, and that was, I was at really just the beginning of a pinnacle of an amazing career in the military. I was a captain getting ready to put on majors. Uh, I had uh, a, a jet to fly, and my peers and superiors, liked me across the board, and everything was going perfect. But at that time we had 4 children, and I was looking at a remote tour to Korea, and there was an opportunity for me to exit the Air Force. And so Andrew and I just really prayed hard about it, and everything. The thing that made sense was to not leave the Air Force. I'm living my
Right.
my dreams that I had since a kid, and Andrew was happy, and everything was. But there was a tug on my heart to not leave my family for a year and to be fully engaged as a father. And so we decided to exit. And it was a really, really difficult decision. And so we came back to Williston, North Dakota, to this adrenaline-less life of being an engineer. And after a couple more years, I remember driving home from work, and I just got really discouraged because I thought, man, nobody cares what I did today. It wasn't important, and I mean, I had the world in my hand, and everything was going perfect, and now I'm just sitting here in Williston, North Dakota, just being boring. and uh, and like you said, and that oftentimes these moments aren't great, big, you know, vivacious epiphanies. They're a still small
Right.
voice, and I can tell you the spot on the road where when I was driving home that the Lord's whisper came to my heart, and he said, because my prayer was, God, I want to do something great for you. I want to do something big and just wonderful for you. And his whisper came. He said, Chuck, you are going home to my great work for you right now. I've given you
Mm.
6 people to raise, disciple, train, and launch for my kingdom. You go and do that well. And I thought, man, that just sunk into my heart in a way that I just never imagined. And at that moment, I knew my ministry was really to the little people that God had given me charge over. And I
Right.
had no idea that really within a couple months after that, God gave me that first story to share, and it just exploded from there. So, being obedient to those small whispers can just change everything. And so that was a significant defining moment in my life.
Oh, absolutely. And so often it, the Lord actually uses those things that seem so boring in the moments. It is through those in between moments, those mundane times, that God is growing and shaping you, that you are getting more context for what's going on around you, that it's a step by step growth, and the Holy Spirit is leading every step of the way. And just when you kind of step back and you have a helicopter view of what God has done, kind of over, you look back in your rearview mirror and you see all these things, and you recognize how personal and how good
Mm.
God has been. It makes it so much easier to trust Him for those next defining moments that are going to continue to come along, as He's going to continue to give you opportunities and tasks to fulfill as you are continuing to build His kingdom and to walk as His follower.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That is so true. Those years when you think nothing's happening are actually so critical and crucial to
Mm.
the preparation for what's coming. And we just oftentimes don't see that. But like you said too, now being a little bit older in my age, I look back and I have all of that to rest on for the next moment, right? But for a young person, oftentimes they don't have that, and so they're fresh into this, and that's where I think, having some examples to learn from and some mentors to counsel uh, is very, very helpful, and just to reassure them that the Lord has you, and He has you in an amazing way. Just rest in that, um, and have the courage to say yes and move forward. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, God has given you the opportunity to uniquely through stories equip, like you noted, people all around the world, just as God has first of all given you an amazing gift at storytelling, an amazing way of weaving truths through allegories and through fantasy and all of these different ways. um, Talk to us just a little bit about how God has used those stories that were originally for your kids and what kind of doors you've seen him open. I think you said you now have 23 books, which I'm sure was not your dream when you were looking to be a fighter pilot. So, how have you seen God open doors in ways that you would have never imagined, but now can't imagine him not having done?
oh man, so yeah, I never planned on writing a book. That was the last thing in my head. Engineer, pilot, and all that. Writing a story that was going to get published was never ever something I imagined would happen. That journey alone was just incredible, and I look back and I see God just specifically moving, literally mountains to to make things happen. And so, as far as opportunities and doors being open, I guess probably the most significant, I guess, opportunity is kind of what you guys have been a part of that. um, Most people maybe not realize, but I'm actually a pretty significant introvert, and the stories have some critical themes that are talked about, and so I started to get requests to speak, and I I avoided public speaking like the plague when I was in high school and college, and never took a never took a speech class or anything like that. So all of a sudden now I'm being asked to speak, and I discovered that I actually had the Lord had given me a gift to teach, which has given me the courage to stand up and speak. But it is really hard for me, and even though that is probably the most uncomfortable thing for me to do, because it's just not natural for me, it is the thing that I'm probably the most passionate about. When I get a chance to speak to, 200 dads out there, or 150 teenagers, I just feel like that is a calling that is so potentially consequential that
Yeah,
I don't dare say no to that. And
yeah.
my druthers would be to be home, maybe making something in the wood shop or barbecuing on the grill, but I've learned that God has calls us out of our comfort zone, and to be impactful in any way we can. I'm just an ordinary dad. I call myself an accidental author, um, but when I have a chance to stand up and share with people my passion for Jesus Christ and to maybe encourage young people in their faith, I'd say that's probably the most significant door that has opened, and it's a door I never would have stepped through. I feel like God's kind of had to push me through it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful. It definitely gives me purpose. It gives me a drive to continue on in this ministry, and so I'm grateful for it. And so I'm grateful for you guys, Leslie, for letting me be part of
Hmm. Well, honestly, it's just so we can see Andrea every year. Sorry.
that.
We
Yeah,
just
I
we
don't
just
blame you.
need to we got to have our way to see Andrea every year. I'm just teasing.
She
We are
she's the likable one.
she's amazing. I love Andrea, but we are truly so grateful for your ministry. Like I said at the beginning, to our family, to the thousands of families who have heard you through the years that teach them diligently, and just countless others through the work that you've done, both at other conferences and especially through your books. God has used them incredibly. I've talked to so many families that they've been so instrumental in just the faith of building of their kids, but also giving great conversation starters. I can't tell you how many times we'd be riding around listening to an audiobook, and the conversations that come out of those stories are just golden. They are
Mm,
so, so powerful. So
praise
we
God.
are very grateful. I'd love for you to tell everybody before we go how they can find your books, where they can connect with you. We'll be sure and link all of that in the show notes, but it's good to hear it too.
Sure, thanks for that. So my website is chuckblack.com, so that's pretty simple and straightforward. I do have a Facebook page and also Instagram. Those links are on my website, so you can certainly find them there. And I guess maybe just 20 seconds on the books, if that's okay, to just share what they're
Absolutely.
about. I tend to write in allegory. It's just something that I'm just wired to do. I see in terms of similes and metaphors and allegory. And so the first six books is the Kingdom series. It's an allegory of the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation, kind of using a medieval time period to retell the stories of the Bible, and dealing with the themes of Scripture and the history of the people, and then ultimately the sacrifice of Christ in the application to us personally. The second series is a companion series called The Knights of Eritrea, and my kids were getting a little older, and I wanted to deal with the challenges that they were going to face, every day, and that was the different strongholds and the tactics that the enemy was going to use against them. And so each book has a different theme that it deals with, and from rebellion to greed, apathy, uh, escapism. Just each book has a different theme that it talks about in a very allegorical way. So it's not preachy. So you can have these kids will love the story, the surface story, but like Leslie was saying there, you can jump into conversations that really it opens up the door for conversations you might not
Yeah.
normally have or feel comfortable having with your kids. And so that's kind of fun to see that happen. The third series of books I wrote was The Wars of the Realm, and it's my attempt to put a set of spiritual glasses on young people so they can see into the spiritual realm and understand the reality of spiritual warfare. So that one's probably the most loved by the older readers that I have. And then my new project is the Star Lore Legacy. I returned to allegory, and I take a space odyssey and turn it into an allegory of the Bible, starting with Moses. And I've written six books in that series now. It's kind of my attempt to kind of redeem science fiction because science fiction can get really weird. And so this has biblical themes, biblical teachings, takes you from from Moses through Christ, and then the next six books will be from the Acts of the Apostles all the way through to Revelation. So that's kind of the lowdown on where I'm at. I'm getting older, and I also I'm also the general manager for an automation company, so I don't turn out the books as fast as my readers would like me to, but I'm doing my best. So.
Well, we all appreciate it, and it has been, as always, a great joy to have you here today. I always leave encouraged, and so I thank you for sharing with us and just talking. It's been a joy. So thank you, Chuck, for joining us.
Thank you, Leslie. The honor is mine.
And to the rest of you, I hope that you've got a lot to think about going out from here. I hope that you will look at those defining moments a little bit more strategically now. I hope that you'll approach them with an open heart and open hand and just asking the Lord to reveal what way and what path He has for you, even when it makes no sense, even when it defies what logic would tell you. Remember that God's ways and his plans are always perfect. He knows what is best for you, and he is always with you, leading you and directing you every step of the way. I encourage you to equip yourself for the battle, equip yourself to parent your children well, disciple them well, go for their hearts every single day. Join us at Teach Them Diligently. You're going to get so much great content, great teaching from people like Chuck and others who will invest in you and talk to you. Join us in 365. Teach Them Diligently 365 is a resource that is there for you where you have access to on demand resources like many that we've talked about today, just 365 days a year. Plus, you'll have access to an amazing community of homeschool moms who are focused on the same things that you are. So it's just a great place to connect. But whatever way you connect, I do hope that you will stay in touch with us. So we hope to see you at a Teach Them Diligently. I hope that I am able to get to know you soon. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.